So right off the bat, my name's Noah Winston. I'm a photographer based out in Dallas, Fort Worth, and this year my big focus is blogging and doing a lot of interviews with local photographers and photographers such as yourself who are more known and international. So it's a really great opportunity to start the year off with you.
Oh, good.
So one day in class, I was presenting photographers for research. One of my peers presented your work. I was fascinated by it, and I wanted to learn more. So, 5 years passed, and during this time, I've delved into, your lighting techniques, your schooling, your photographic techniques, and however, my knowledge is not yet sufficient. So here I am looking to learn more from you and see where we can go with that.
Nice.
So I have 11 questions.
Okay.
Hopefully we can get through them in the little time span we have. Um, you can just answer as truthfully or as knowledgeable as you can. The first question is, what initially drew you to the world of photography, and how did your journey in the field begin?
Well, I started out in high school. There was a program that you would take, I think it was six electives. So I was a freshman in high school. You'd take wood shop, welding, woodworking, printmaking, drafting, and photography was one of the electives. I'm not sure if all the high school, I was in Tucson, Arizona. I grew up in Tucson. I'm not sure if all the schools had that, but anyways, it was a program. And at the end of that, of course, I fell in love with photography. And then I ended up taking it the next year as a full elective, and then went through all that program. And then at this my senior year, I was actually a helper to the teacher. So I was able to do all 3 years in high school. And then I photographed for the yearbook and, did things like that. Um, I had no real true, I guess you would say, direction as to, looking at photography as an option for, for an occupation. But that summer, after I graduated, I worked at a dealership parking cars, and I bus tables at night. And I worked all summer, and I was able to buy my first camera, 35 millimeter. It was a Canon EF. In fact, I have it right here. This is it, my first camera.
That's my
And I thought it was the coolest thing on the planet. It was the first black camera. It had a sync speed on the shutter for flash at 1/25th, which I didn't know what that meant at the time. Now we have most of our cameras around 2/50th of a second, 200 2/50th. It was a great camera to start with. I remember putting it around my neck and standing in front of the mirror in my bathroom going, boy, do I look good. I mean, it's hard to explain how. I drove a car that was worth $300. My camera cost 350. So my camera was more expensive than my car. Um, and then, but what happened was I was really, really fortunate. I was working after that Christmas, I got a job, or in the fall, I got a job working at it was called Peace Army Surplus. It was like a backpacking Army surplus store. And I was into backpacking, going up in the mountains and hiking. And this professor from Pima Community College came in. He was the head of the department of photography department. He came in looking for a waterproof container. And so I didn't know who he was. And I said, well, what do you need this for? And he says, well, it's for my camera, my film and stuff. I'm going on a river trip or something. And I went, oh, you a photographer? He goes, yes. I go, me too. Right. I don't know why, but I was enthusiastic enough to say yes. And I said, I have my own camera and I love going to mountains and taking pictures. Anyways, he said, well, you ever thought about taking classes in college? And I was like, no. He goes, well, I'm the professor of head of photography at Pima Community College. I think you should. And I was like, well, okay. Well, anyways, so that sparked me to go take his classes. He was one of the best professors I ever had. I went to Arizona State University for 2 years and finished up at University of Arizona in Tucson with a degree in photography. But I don't think if it was for him walking into that surplus store, I would have looked at photography. And even then, I didn't know if it was going to be a profession, but at least he sparked an interest in me. And he really was an amazing human being, and in terms of inspiring young people. So that's how I began the process.
That's almost a little bit similar to me. My coach, my football coach, was a photographer, and I started in his editing class on the weekends, learning how to use Photoshop. And I unofficially joined the journalism club, for the yearbook. Um,
Right.
I took pictures for him, even though I wasn't part of the class. But, then my art teacher handed me a camera, and I took it from there and just started like taking pictures of friends and family. And it just kind of went on from there, where I, went to school for it and
Yeah.
learned the basics and everything, and where I fell in love with the genre and, sculpting with light.
I think that's why I love to teach, is because I understand the value of someone coming along and prodding, a student or someone that's just starting out into something that they love, or getting them inspired to follow a passion of some sort. Photography is a wonderful thing to do. So I always take time for young people, or even not just young people. I mean, anyone that's interested in photography, I always take time for them.
Yes. So the second question is, now for me, your signature style often involves dramatic lighting and composite techniques. Can you elaborate on the creative, process behind one of your iconic images?
Well, so back in the so I started out as a landscape photographer, graduated from college, still thinking I was going to be a landscape photographer. I got a studio with a buddy in Denver, and he was really gung ho about commercial advertising and all that. I didn't know what
Okay.
that meant. And he had a strobe, and I had assisted Bill Robbins, a celebrity photographer in LA, for 3 months prior to moving to Denver with him. But so I worked around strobes, but I had never really done portraits. And I remember I wanted to do a portrait, and I asked my studio mate, I said, "Can I borrow your softbox and strobe?" He said, "Oh yeah, sure." Kind of showed me how to set it up. And I was like, "Oh, this is kind of fun." And I remember starting to do portraits. And about that time, I thought, well, and my studio mate, he was more of a product shooter, but we took a generator out on location to do a shoot, and we strobed a subject. I was kind of helping him out. And I watched the results of that. This is before digital, obviously. But we were using Polaroid. And I saw him strobe outdoors, and I was like, that is incredible. So I began the process of using generators at first. Then the technology came in about a couple of years after that, where you had battery pack strobes. They weren't as powerful as today's strobes, but it was the beginning of taking a strobe inside of a softbox umbrella or something into the field and shooting, lighting the subject and letting your shutter speed knock the background down, darken the value of the background. I did that, and that was my signature for literally 25 years. I became sort of known for doing strobing outdoors, shooting all over ad campaigns, and it kind of snowballed into that. Well, when digital came along, partly because of budgets, but I remember, doing these big elaborate sports shoots where you had an athlete and we had 25 people on set, and it was big production. Well, then budget started getting cut, and I thought, how can I do this cheaper? And I thought, well, what if I photograph a subject in a studio, do the background separate? I can just be by myself or with one assistant. And then I go and I put the two together in Photoshop, creating a composite. And that composite, though, was still mimicking my signature style that I had by strobing people outdoors. So it was sort of a combination of the new technology, but taking the old way of seeing. So that old way of seeing was with me for 25 years. Digital made it a little easier. And I started doing dramatic lighting, a little more dramatic lighting, and it sort of fell into place. And then I started doing hundreds, if not thousands, of portraits of subjects, mostly sports figures, with that technique. And that kind of launched me on the level, a national level, if not international level of teaching. And my work got out there. So it was kind of a combination of taking my signature that I'd already had and developed for 25, 20 plus years, but bringing it into the new technology.
That's amazing. So how do you approach the challenge of bringing out the authentic personality of your subjects in your composite portraits whenever you discovered that new technique?
Well, so I think that um, if you played the guitar, or you want to learn the guitar, and I by the way, I play the guitar, but when you first play the guitar, it's like your fingers don't want to work, and someone shows you how to do a G chord, and you're like, and your fingers are like, they just feel like they're impossible to get to a G chord. And then what you do is you do your, let's say you start with three chords, but you start with a rhythm, and then you have to switch to the chord, and you have to time it. And at first it's like really difficult, but with time it gets faster and faster, and you get easier and easier. Pretty soon it becomes muscle memory. And then then you don't even think about it. Then you're doing chords where you're stretching all over the place, and you're doing elaborate guitar stuff. It's no different with photography. You start out, you get a subject in front of you, and you fumble, and it's a disaster, and you hope for the best. You think, I don't know if I could learn how to do this. And then with time, after you do hundreds, if not thousands of portraits, it becomes second nature. So when someone's in front of me, I don't think about necessarily as much as you might think. I don't. It's not as a scripted or a. I might say, okay, I want to do my edgy lighting, or I might want to do cross light or whatever. Or I might start with one lighting and go, it's not working. Let me try something else. But I don't really think about it. It's so second nature. If you think about how many portraits I've done in 40 years, I've probably done, I don't know, 20,000 portraits or something. I don't know. It's a ridiculous amount of portraits that I've done. So it becomes a second nature, just like if you were a blues guitar player or whatever. You're just up there and you're just letting it run because you've done it so long, and you're letting your intuition take over. So I always say my intuition is my guide. I don't think about it. I just let it go. On occasion, I'll have an idea. And of course, we have the ability to go to a magazine or go down on the web, and you see a photograph and you go, oh, I kind of like that. And then you say, okay, I got a subject next week. I'm going to try something similar. Or you get inspired by something, and then you go out and you try it. That happens to me. I don't mind doing that. But really, it comes down to the fact that I have repeated the process more than probably 99% of the people on the planet. That's how come I get the results I do. It's just second nature.
So with your experience with how you explained it, how many photo shoots, during the time have presented unexpected challenges? How'd you overcome those challenges with that?
Well, so part of the thing that happens is as a photographer, we're really working with two worlds. We're working with a technical process,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have the creative. So you really have two worlds that have to collide. As a general rule, we tend to fall into one side or the other. We're engineer minded. We're more technical. We're more creative. We just kind of blow with the wind. A lot of people that are creative, they don't know how to set up lights. People that are very technical, they don't know how to understand the mood and the feel of conceptual photograph or whatever. So to me, I think I fell into the more technical side and I had to really push the creative. So when I go and do a photo shoot, I'm thinking, well, why am I doing? What's the reason? What's the end result? What am I trying to do? What am I trying to say? What can I do that's a little different than anyone else, or something I've done different in the past? So to me, it's just a big experiment with lots of failures. And with each failure, I learn something new. And over time, the failures hopefully get less, not always, but you keep growing with the failures. And then eventually, like you say, you get, hired by a company to photograph a $100 million athlete that, you know, it's a big budget and whatever. So it's a progression. So you start out, you fumble, you do a really bad job. If you saw my early photographs, you'd go, this guy doesn't have a chance in hell to make it in the real world. But with time, that gets better.
I know whenever I shoot, I always walk into the studio not knowing what to do or how to do anything per se. I was always very technical about my photography when it comes to lighting, but when it came to creativity, I was always fumbling and trying to push it and always look for, creativity in that. My favorite photographer, you might have heard of him, Robert Mapplethorpe. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
love his work. His creativity was just when he started out, he was just photographing people. And I kind of had to realize like once you get the hang of just photographing people, your creativity comes in and you pop up these ideas that you want to do, and as you look at it, more inspiration, you yourself grow as that photographer and, your creativity, your style technique become more definite.
Yeah. It's all about repeating the process more than anyone else. It's that simple. The more you do anything of one, whatever it is, the better you get at it. And so I think the biggest fear for some people, like, say, me, that's maybe technical and I'm lacking a little bit on the creative side, the fear is that I'm never going to be smart enough or creative enough to make it really happen. Right. And you think, well, that's reserved for a certain group of people, but you got to be born with it. I think you have to be born with something, but I think the creative process is really about taking a risk and not worrying about what other people think.
Yeah.
That's the single most important thing, because if you start worrying about what other people think, then you're going to go and go, I shouldn't do that because people are going to laugh at me, or they're going to think that's stupid, that's bad composition, bad lighting, whatever. And so you have to just say, look, I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to make a mistake. Maybe I'll find something that's pretty amazing. And with time, I'm going to find my voice. And so anyone that's at the top of the creative food chain didn't start out there. They had to go and work toward that.
Yes. So what role does personal storytelling play in your work, and how do you choose the themes or narrate your projects?
Well, when I was in school at Arizona, well, when I went to even Pima Community State, I remember there was a program for photojournalists.
Mm,
We were the fine arts, and then there was a photojournalist. Photojournalists were out there to save the world, and they were more storytelling, or at least that's what they were working toward, as being good storytellers. And it wasn't until I did a book on the Navajo, I spent 2 years photographing the Navajo people up in northern Arizona. It was the first time that I had to sort of repeat the same subject matter over and over, 2 year time period, which was very difficult for me because I'm kind of a little hyper. I like to bounce around on ideas. So it taught me the discipline of sticking with one subject. That was important. And then I also had to tell the story. What was the story I was going to say? What was my goal? Well, my goal, I'm a photographer and I like taking pictures. Well, that's not enough. So I had to learn to tell a story. And here's what I would say now, encourage people to do is, I'll give you an example, and I've given this example before. I'm a commercial advertising photographer. So I did a lot of work for healthcare providers. And so they come to me and they say, we have this heart medicine that helps people live longer. Grandpa, the senior citizen grandpa age. And we want to do something that's going to make people that are 65 and older or whatever buy this drug to help them live longer. So what I do now is I try to put myself and create some kind of emotion with an image that tells a story. So I'll give you an example. So I'm a grandpa now, okay? I was also a kid that had a grandpa, and I was also a kid that had a father, okay? So I look back at the memories that I had with my dad or my grandpa, and I say, what were those memories? Well, remember my dad took me fishing. Grandpa took me fishing. Oh, well, that's pretty important. So grandpa loves to take his grandson fishing. So you say, okay, that's a story. So I go and I get this grandpa and I get the grandson. He's like 6 years old. He's got a little teeny fishing pole with a bobber on it, and grandpa's got his fishing pole, and they're walking down a little path toward the lake. Got aspen trees on the side, the lake, blue lake is in the distance, the little path, and they're going to have fun for the day. And here you have a scenario of grandpa, grandson going fishing. That's an emotional response to someone who says, I want to be around for my grandkids, or I want to be a dad who's around for his kids. So you're telling a story that has some kind of emotional tug. And so that is really the hook that you should always be thinking about. You can't always do that in every photograph, because I like a portrait. I love people, in the face. I love this face to tell a story. But what I'm saying is if you can incorporate some kind of emotion to your picture, it's going to tell the story better and win people over.
Okay. So your career spans various genres from sports to portraits. How do you adapt your approach when working in different photographic styles?
Well, so a lot of for the most part, your technical and your approach to something is going to cross over. So if I'm shooting for healthcare or I'm shooting it for sports, the sports is going to be edgier. It's going to be, muscles and, tough people, whatever. But I'll give you an example, and then you can maybe this helps you understand how I work and how I think. I did a project on Harley Davidson riders across America.
Yes.
It was 100 days straight, 36 states, 13,000 miles. When I picked up my assistant, and I had met this guy on one of my lectures. He was a Harley enthusiast, and I had wanted to do this Harley project. And he said to me when I said, oh yeah, I want to photograph Harley riders across America. And he goes, I'm your assistant. And I went, oh, okay. And I already had a couple of assistants. And so when it came time, I called him up and I said, are you serious? You want to go on the road? He said, yeah. So I drive to Georgia. I pick him up from Phoenix to Georgia. That's not a short little drive, a couple of day drive. I pick him up. He gets in the car and I say, Brad, we got 100 days in front of us. And it's going to take me 100 days to figure out what the hell I'm doing. He goes, what? You're Joel Grimes. You're like, master photographer, portrait. What are you talking about? It's going to take you 100 days. I said, at the end of 100 days, let's have this conversation again. So at the end of the project, I said, do you understand what I mean now? And he goes, yeah, because you start out and you go, okay, a Harley rider. What do I do with this Harley rider? Where do I put them? Or how do I approach the Harley rider? They're pretty big, badass people, right? So after 100 days of doing it, I got really good at going, okay, I want you over here. Let's go do this. And your vision starts to take formulation because you've repeated the process enough to where you know what to do. It's not a question. It comes easy. So it took 100 days to do that. Even as I've been doing it for 40 years, it still took me time to figure out what I was going to do. So with every genre that you do, give it time, repeat it, and you're going to get really good at it.
That's that sounds like something only a few people can do, whereas it takes them so long to realize what they need in order to complete a shoot, rather than just going in and saying, hey, I know exactly what it is I want to do and what I want to do. And they do it, and it turns out it's not what they wanted to do, and they want to go back and redo it, but they can't at all.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, like I said, is there's a little bit of humility that has to happen when no matter what level you're at, you always have to say, look, I am just trying to figure this out. I don't have it all. I don't have all the answers, and I'm willing to grow and learn something new. And with like I said, with a new genre, you're gonna have to say, I don't know anything about Harley riders or Harley motorcycles. Don't act like I do, right? I might know something, but I'm not gonna go and assume that I know everything. I'm gonna learn as I go and grow with the project. So
I saw the images. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when I looked at them, they kind of felt personal. Like this is something that I see a lot of photographers take on a project that's something in their interest. Like you said, you play the guitar, so I see a lot of photographers take on things that they're used to or they're always around. When I looked at the images, it's kind of felt like something that you've done before, like it was personalized just for you. And I guess that's kind of what you were explaining, like at the end of the 100 days, what you were getting at, when you finished the project. I think the project, it came out really good. I loved it when I saw it.
the other thing that when I approach somebody to photograph them, I um, I want them to have an experience that's positive. Okay. Because I photographed a lot of billionaires, congressmen, athletes, I want it to go really smooth so that they go, well, that was actually pretty fun. That wasn't as, it's not like going to the dentist, right?
Yeah.
I also want to pull something that's like you say, a little more intimate out of that person. I always think there's something about someone that I can capture if I get the right look, the right moment, the right lighting, the right whatever. And I'm looking for it, looking for it, looking for it. And then, after I shoot 20, 30, 200, whatever images, I look at them, I go, that's the one that tells me the most intimate, reveals the most intimate about that person. And even on the editing, there could be a dozen images that maybe you would choose over what I would choose, but I'm looking for that one sort of intimate image, and I pass up a lot of images that could be very good images used for certain whatever reasons. But I'm drawn to a certain look that's more, maybe it is more intimate. So maybe it's not only in the shooting, but it's in the editing that I'm picking the right image to say this is my hero image that came from that photo shoot. And again, you may go, no, that's not the best shot. This one's much better. This one he's laughing or whatever, or um, but again, I'm drawn to something. I go to what I like. That's it.
All right, so here's a fun one. I usually like this question myself. Can you discuss the evolution of your editing and post processing techniques over the years, and any specific tools you find indispensable?
Well, so I started out in the dark room. Okay. And so you have to understand the experience of a dark room was pretty amazing, especially, we have the Star Wars effect today. We know everything's, super, video games and things that we do that are, just absolutely amazing in terms of entertainment and also the wow factor. Back in, 1972, when I started high school, um, going into a dark room and seeing a print come up in the developing tray was like pretty amazing, and and so having that experience and also learning the what I call the zone system, but that's getting the most tones that you can out of a print um, from the shadows to the highlights, and detail and all that. That was what I tried to master. 10 years of studying the zone system, Ansel Adams, and all that. So that becomes indispensable when it comes to looking at a photograph and deciding what to do with it. So all those years in the darkroom, I'm not suggesting that anyone today go in a darkroom and start, because I don't think that's really realistic. I mean, it's nice that if you have the ability to go into a darkroom and do a print, but it's not really realistic. But the realistic part of it is, or the best part is, to be able to look at an image and determine what direction you want to go in it. And so every photograph is manipulated, right? From what lens you use, what lighting you use, then you go and you edit it. It's a constant step-by-step manipulation. That's what photography is, and that's what being an artist is. You're working towards what you like. So the editing side, it was extremely gradual. At first, we were just scanning negatives and transparencies before digital capture. And then we were bringing them into Photoshop. And then the digital capture came along, and, all these techniques. And so it's been a very sort of slow step-by-step process of learning the editing from not only the darkroom, but also the digital side of it. And so I don't know, things just happen. I'll tell you this, though. There is a very concentrated effort on my part to create something that's unique to me, that brands me. I'm sure there's some things that I just kind of stumble into. Yep. But for the most part, I understand the value of separating myself from the masses. I do that with the lighting. I do that with lens choice. I do that with, these techniques. A lot of them are in the digital side, Photoshop. So I'm trying to separate myself from the masses. So I'm not the smartest guy on the planet, but I do understand the value of branding and creating a signature brand that separates me. So I've made choices along the way that said, I like that. And then I've gone into, like usually in the holidays, I'll go in and I'll just say, okay, I'm just going to try something new. I'm going to take this image, I'm going to open it up, I'm going to go do this technique to it, this technique, and then see where I come out. And then all of a sudden, after 100 of them, I go, I like this. And that becomes something I start repeating into my work. So it's a progression. Obviously I can't live without Photoshop. I use a Wacom tablet. I'm trying to think anything outside of that. I don't really use a ton of third-party plugins. I do use Luminar Neo for a few things, but very rarely. It's almost all Photoshop.
Nice. All right, so I have 3 more questions for you. As an educator, what advice do you have for aspiring photographers trying to find their unique style in a saturated industry?
Well, so when I was starting out, you could say at that time that it was saturated, meaning that there were a lot of photographers.
Yeah.
There's more today, but there's more opportunities today, right? Mm-hmm. So there's always going to be a saturated market no matter what you do. If you want to be a musician and you want to get, a record deal or whatever, there's a lot of people doing it. You go to LA to be an actor, a lot of people doing it. You want to be a model, supermodel, a lot of people doing it. No matter what you decide in life, there's going to be a huge amount of people trying to do the same thing that you want to do. The difference is very simple. When you go and begin your journey to chase your dream, you're going to come across multitude of barriers. Some barriers may be unique to you, but for the most part, the same barriers that you're going to cross or come in front are the same barriers everyone else has to come into. Getting rejected, trying to get work, knocking on doors, all that, whatever. You go out there and you try to exert yourself in the marketplace. You fumble. Your portfolio is not very good. You're growing. You're trying to get better, but it's the same barriers. They always are there. You have to knock them down, and you have to realize you're not alone in the journey. But here's the good news: every day, group of people are going to quit. Same group, you start out in the same group. There's only a few that are going to get to the top because they never quit. So every time you hit a barrier and you get frustrated and you want to quit, you realize someone else is going through the same emotions. But don't quit. That's it. And when you get to the top, you're not the smartest, you're not the best looking, you're not the creative genius. You're someone that took a chance and went after it and never quit. And so it's kind of a weird thing because I've rubbed elbows with photographers that started out with me that were better than me, smarter than me, better looking than me, had money, parents that gave them money. They had everything, but they didn't make it because they quit. They came across something and they went, "Oh, I can't make it." So my sons call me. I have 4 boys. They call me, "Dad, I'm stuck. I can't do this." I go, "Son, today, someone just like you is going through the same thing, but they're going to quit. Don't be the person that quits." And then you get past the barrier. Oh, you go, "Oh, you know what? That wasn't so bad." You're looking back, you go, "That wasn't as hard as I thought it was." And then you go to the next barrier, and then you have to overcome that. So at some point, you're going to want to quit. And circumstances may be bleak. You have I was in a studio in Denver. I had no money. Clients owed me money. I had nothing. I didn't have enough money for a stamp to send out a promo. I didn't have enough money. I had a box of cream of wheat in my cupboard, and I ate it for 3 days straight until there was nothing left in that box. And then I, scrounged and whatever. I've been through it. I've been starving. I've been through every emotion that anyone could possibly go. I lived in a warehouse with no heat in the middle of winter. I had a down sleeping bag. That's the only thing that saved me. So I've been through it all. And so when my boys come to me and go, "Oh, I can't," I go, "Son, been there, done that, but I didn't quit." So that's the best advice I can give someone.
So last 2 questions. So this one's a little bit more, I feel like you'll like this one because with more people advancing in photography, more trends are coming up. So how has the photography industry changed since you started? And what I mean is like, what trends or advancements do you find most exciting or challenging today?
Well, so one of the things that you will discover if you have a career like I have for 40 plus years is that there's a constant flux of change. And you can't, you either accept it or it'll kill you. It'll spit you out. So when you come along and you say, "I've got the cat's meow, the best techniques, the best look," and you start doing pictures and everyone's hiring you, you have to, in the back of your head, you have to say, one day, this look, this approach is going to come to an end. It's got a shelf life. Everything has a shelf life. Music, whatever style of anything you do, it's going to get old and people are not going to want it anymore. So you have to be able to go and roll with the change. It's sometimes brutal because change requires you have to get out and work again, develop something new, and spend a lot of time doing it. And because most people are lazy. It's just the way we are as human beings. So I have a saying that, and this is probably changing, but I used to say that it takes about 3 years to develop a brand, and it'll get old after about 5 years to 7 years, somewhere around there. It starts to get old. It's not going to last forever. So what happens is in my career, I've had this time period where I'm like trying to get a grip on, a new technique, a new look, a new style, new whatever, marketing it, getting out there. And all of a sudden the success comes. I'm like, whoa, things are great. Money's good. And all of a sudden the phone stops ringing. And you're like, what happened? Then I got to start over. And then I got to get on the bicycle again and start all over again. And then all of a sudden success comes, and all of a sudden I get, money starts pouring in, and then it comes to an end. So in a given career, you're probably going to do this 3 to 5 times, easily 3 to 5 times. It's not easy, but know that, like I can predict the future. I'm a prophet. I can say, guess what, Mr. Little rock star photographer, that look you've got, it's going to come to an end. 100%. I know it's going to happen. So you have to come and just say, what's new? So when it comes to the new trends, new techniques, in the end, follow your intuition, do what you love. Don't chase somebody else's love. Because someone else, what they love, if you try to adapt it, you say, oh, this person is very successful and they're doing this. They're doing it because they love it. You're going to do it because you think that's going to be successful, chasing their, whatever they're doing. And it's a lot harder to get up early in the morning or work late at night doing something that someone else loves. So do what you love and then repeat it. And you'll go further with that.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little different for me. I understand what you're saying, and I've seen people try to chase after like what you do with their lighting and with their composites and everything, and then they stop. And then someday I'm like, why did they stop doing it? Because they're doing really good at it. But I guess at the same time, they, I noticed they started doing another trend and then they keep it up. But I guess it's good to have what you love and what you do and sticking with it, because often you can lose yourself and trying to do what everyone else does and trying to, start something new. If you have something that you been doing for so long that you can stick with and that everyone likes, most importantly, what you like, I think that's the most important part right there, is making sure that you don't give up on your own trend. You can do other trends, you can test it out, you can dab into it a little bit, but as long as you don't give up on what you do yourself, I think that what makes you a great photographer at that.
Yeah. Well, think about this one. If I came to you and I said, all right, what do you want to do? And you say, I want to be National Geographic photographer. I want to travel the world. And I would say, okay, to do that, number one is you're going to have to go out into the environment somewhere and create a story that looks like a geographic type story. And you're not going to have someone pay you to do that. You're going to have to come up with your own money. So let's just say that I have to fly to Colombia to do some, indigenous tribe in the middle of nowhere and do a story on this, whatever. So I got to work a job I don't really like and save my money. And then I have to go and I have to, take that trip, bring those images back, and then make an appointment or somehow get into National Geographic and show it. The odds are that they're going to look at that and they're going to go, not bad, but we've already done that. And it's kind of, do it again.
Yeah.
So you go out and do it again. You work 9 months to get enough money to go out for 2 months or whatever it is. And you do it and you do it and you do it. And it may take 3 to 5 times of you not getting paid, sacrificing everything, living in a cardboard box or whatever it is out of your car. And then eventually you get good because you've done it so much that when you present it to the photo editor, they go, hey, you got something here. We'll hire you. But I think most people think, oh, I'm just going to walk into National Geographic and they're going to go, you're really good. Let's just hire you. It doesn't happen that way. And if I told you how it really works, then you're prepared for the long haul and the sacrifice. And I don't think most photography teachers today really do give, maybe they do, I don't know. They didn't tell me the truth about the real world when I was in college. But the thing is maybe they told me that I, don't expect to make a living with a camera, but they never told me how to make a living with my camera. They never told me to go and get rejected and get rejected and get rejected and get rejected. And eventually someone's going to accept you. I didn't understand that until, well into my, 20s, late 20s. So I guess my question or my answer to you is that it's, you have to look at you have a goal. You have to look at, I have to sacrifice it. And that's actually a good thing, because if everyone has to go out and do the sacrificing, most people won't end up doing it. So that leaves you with very few competition at the end. That's why I say, when people say there's so many photographers, I go, 95% of them will never pay the price. If you're willing to pay the price, you'll be successful. I mean, you play football, you know sports, right?
Yeah.
It's not easy. You got to fight for your slot, right? You got
I
to
gave
fight
up
for the
on it.
position. Well, but I'm saying it's easy. But you know why you gave up on it? Because you didn't love it enough. You know, you have to love it enough to where you go through the hell to get there. And uh, you know, so that's what you have to ask yourself. Am I willing to go through the hassles to get where I want to go? And you say yes, and then okay. But I don't think most of us understand how the real world works. We're kind of, I was naive, I think, when I started out, but I had to learn. That's why when you're talking to someone who's 66 years old, they've been through all this. And I can pass on some insight that hopefully will get people inspired.
I don't know if I was naive or not, but I remember telling my instructor that I want to be a fine art photographer. And they just plainly looked at me and told me, "Well, you're going to be broke. You're not you're
Yeah.
not going to have anywhere to stay." And I didn't understand what they meant by that until it took me some time to realize that my school wasn't teaching me to be a fine art artist. My school was teaching me to be a commercialized artist, create a business, either work underneath someone, work with someone, or have people work for you. There was no, you go out, you do what you want to do because you like it, and you make millions, or you become popular, famous, fortune comes to you and everything. It's like, no, we're here to teach you to be commercialized. We want you to make a living and be successful in this way, not this way right here. I'm still lingering to that. I can do fine art photography while also being commercialized.
Mhm.
I'm trying to balance the two and see where I can take it. It is difficult at times and very hard because, you know, one outweighs the other sometimes when you are so passionate about doing something, but sometimes you get those challenges and it puts you at a halt.
Well, here's a really interesting insight. You're driving down the road and you see a billboard, and maybe it's a sports athlete or something, really cool lighting, really cool shot. You're like, oh my gosh. You drive by, you're like, that was amazing. I would love to have a billboard one day and get paid to be a photographer like that. And so what I do is I ask myself a question. Someone got paid that. How do they do it? How did that person get to the point where they had a billboard, a national ad campaign, right? So if you say that's what I want to do, find the path. Now, if you say I want to be a fine art photographer, you got to look at successful fine art photographers. What was the path that they took to get to where they ended up making a living as a fine art photographer? Someone done it. Many people have done it. Well, if they can do it, so can you. That's the one thing I always say to people is that they're not that unique. They're not that special in that they're only, only their talent or whatever got them there. They just found a path. So it's not how good of a photographer you are, it's how willing you are to sacrifice and work toward getting and figuring out what the path is and getting there. It's I think we have this misconception that, and I was doing an interview once, and this lady kept saying, "We have Joel Grimes here. He's a very talented photographer." Blah blah blah. And after the sixth time, she said, "Talent." I said, "Could you stop insulting me?" And she's like, "What?" I said, "You're assuming that I'm talented, and I got there because of my talent. That's not how I got here."
Yeah.
And so, so find out who's successful, and then figure out how they got there. What was a path that they took?
Yep. Speaking of talent, I heard this one saying, you can only be a prodigy for so long. After a while, you have to actually start working towards, being that great at what it is you do.
Yeah. Well, prodigies don't really we most what we call prodigies. Eddie Van Halen, guitar prodigy. Now, Eddie Van Halen was spending 8 to 10 hours a day practicing guitar at 14 years old, 15 years old. That's why he became a prodigy, or we call prodigy, is because he was. I mean, my kids all are in music. I used to play guitar. Who plays the guitar 8 to 10 hours a day?
Not
Who?
people.
Only ones that make it to the top. So, how much was it a prodigy, or how much was it because of his hard work? Maybe
Yeah.
he just had the perfect combination. We can't all be Michael Jordan, but I'll tell you what, Michael Jordan got there because he was a hard worker. He was disciplined and he was tenacious. And, so.
All right. So the last question here. Um, One of my favorite artists, the late John Baldessari, stated that younger artists should know three things. Talent is cheap. You have to be possessed, which you can't will. Being at the right place at the right time. As a photographer, I came across a statement that always intrigued me, though I have never been entirely convinced of its accuracy. I understand what the speaker meant. If you were to echo his words in your language, how would you advise younger photographers?
Well, when
And sorry,
yeah,
I'll
when he's
restate the
saying,
three things.
yeah, well, when he's saying that, you know, talent is cheap, what he means by that is that, and I've kind of alluded to it, is that somehow we believe that if I take a brush and I slap a big old swipe of red paint across it, then take a purple one and do it and circle it or whatever and put it in a frame somehow, and I say this is art and it's extremely valuable, and someone buys it, and therefore it makes it valuable. That's what he's saying, is art is cheap, in that it's not the actual art that was what made the value. It's the perception and the fact that you convince someone to write a check for it. And so that's where when you're in the art world, you realize that it's okay. You walk into a gallery. I've done this. I used to have to do reviews when I was in college. You walk into a gallery and you look around, you go, I wouldn't line my bird cage with this stuff. This is so bad. And then there's somebody writing a check, $40,000 for something. That's what he's meaning. It's not, I mean, it's a game you play that of perception, and so it's an interesting, like I said, after you spend 40 years in it, you understand it. The other thing about being possessed, I think that there's some truth to that, in that you say, I want this and I'm willing to pay the price for it. And it's kind of like you're almost insane. People are saying, why are you driving a $300 car and you have a $3,000 camera or whatever it is, right? Why are you living in your car and sacrificing everything to be a photographer? So you have to be possessed in that you want it so bad that you're willing to sacrifice it. I think that we as general rules, we are lazy, we're weak, we're fragile, we're insecure, and a handful of people will go out and chase it at all cost. And that's what I think he means by that. And the third thing is, what was the third thing?
Being at the right place at the right time.
Well, I had that Professor Lubernall come into my workplace when I was 19 years old, and he just happened to inspire me to go sign up for his class, and there it went. So yes, I think there's a lot of that. But that goes back to the fact that if I'm out there every day doing something to chase my dream, good things are going to follow. You're going to meet the right people. Something's going to happen. You're going to stumble across somebody and they go, "Oh, wow, I love your work. Let me hire you." Well, because you were out there. You weren't just sitting at home watching television, playing, PlayStation and eating potato chips. You're out there doing something. So I think that's what he means. I've watched that interview. It's a pretty good interview, and um, I think what he's trying to do is make people realize that there's a game to be played on one end, and there's a obsession on the other end that you never stop and never quit and you just keep going forward. So, um, yeah.
I often find myself back at the second statement that you have to be possessed, but you can't will. When I first started out in photography, I was shooting, when I started off in school, I was shooting no more than 8 to 9 shoots per day. I'll book the studio more than the teachers because the teachers have to use the studio for class. Sometimes they'll take me off the list because it intersected with their schedule. I found myself at the wheel. I don't know what it was, but I was possessed and taken over to shoot every single day. I didn't miss a day. I was in a studio back to back. I did at least my max, probably up to 30 shoots within a week. And sometimes it didn't even matter what the theme was, the subject matter. I would just find myself in that studio. Now, me personally, I have a history of mental illness. So when I did start taking my medication, I felt as if all my creativity and my drive went away. So
Mm-hmm. That's
I had to, I was just off. Just I was a gremlin. I was just doing everything bizarre, just doing whatever it was to create photography. But as I, corrected myself, got on my medication, it's like my drive and creativity just went out the window. So I had to relearn what it meant to be possessed, that you can't will when it comes to doing photography. I had to go out and figure out what it is that drove me to be that creative, to be that anxious, to be that driven, to want to go out and be this photographer, that everyone else couldn't be like. Everyone else couldn't keep up with me the way I did things. And as I slowed down, I felt as if I was a lesser part of what I used to be.
well,
So
that's the danger of the medication. Is it has a positive side here, but a negative side on the back end. What I would say to you, and I'm not a licensed psychologist or whatever, but find out the root of your original reason to go on medication. Find out the root of that. Where's that coming from? Solve that, and don't let medication solve it for you, because it will never.
yes,
And again, I'm not going to, we're getting a little more personal here, but what I'm saying is that I've seen so many amazing people lose their drive because they went on medication, and it just numbs you down, and then you lose the edge. So I would find out, I would take a step backwards and find out what the root of it is. And I'm a very spiritual person. I love the idea that there's someone greater than me at work, and I can rely on that. It's not just, I'm not alone. And I
yes,
think that when you feel like you're alone and nobody, well, I say nobody, most people have some kind of drama, trauma, or hardship in their past that can set you into a state of either depression, or you're reliving the past, or overcoming things. None of us are exempt from uh, something. I mean, that drama that we've had in our childhood or whatever, and then we have a hard time overcoming it. And a lot of people go to drugs and alcohol and things like that, to numb their whole, whatever. Find out what the root is, and then you go from there. And I would encourage you to look to a divine work. That's what I turn my kids to. They come to me. They all have struggles, in life overtakes them. They can't pay their mortgage or rent or whatever, and they call me up. And I always say, there's somebody that's greater than you at work in you. Put your trust in that. So I'll leave it at that. But I think you know where I'm going.
Yes. All right, so that's all my questions here. I have a few questions from others who, I put out there who anyone have
Oh,
questions.
oh, nice.
Um, actually, I was one of those people because I was like, I have a question too because I just got it. I watched one of your videos the other day, and I just purchased my first Westcott
Right.
speed light, which is, let me see, it's the FJ80.
Yeah, 80. It's a great little flash.
I never owned a speed light. I normally use um Pro Photo, Strobe, or Dynalight. I don't know if you ever use Dynalight.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so my question is, which is your favorite brand of light to use and why?
Well, I've been using Westcott now for a while, and they sponsor me. I'm one of their top pros. But I became a top pro because I believed in their company. But it doesn't matter what strobe you use. Here's where I would say that, when it comes to choosing strobes and modifiers, is that when you go outdoors in the full sunlight, I'm in the desert out here in Arizona. When you go outdoors, you have to overpower the sun. So power is very critical. But if you're indoors, you're shooting early in the morning, maybe before the sun comes up, maybe the glow in the sky, you got a cowboy and you're on this beautiful field, the sun just coming up, you can get away with pretty low power strobes. It's when the sun gets up and it gets hot, very bright out, that's when you need the power. The other thing that's really interesting now too is that we can move our lights toward our subject more. So even if I have a horse and a cowboy, I bring my light in or whatever, and it's in the frame, all I have to do is shoot a second frame and take it out. Or even now I can clone it out, the strobe, the light stand, and whatever. So I can bring my lights in closer. So that requires less power. I still like to have a lot of power, but if you say, okay, I got a FJ 80, what can I do with it? Well, you can do a lot with it, but you got to bring it in close and you have to shoot in low light. But that might be an advantage because now it forces you to shoot early morning or late light, and you can do some really creative things under those conditions.
Nice. All right, so the next question was, let me see. Who is your favorite photographer?
Well, when I was in college studying, Ansel Adams, of course, I was a landscape guy. And there were other landscape photographers that came along. But as I started studying portrait photography, Irving Penn was the master of all portrait back in the 50s and 60s, 70s. He really, I think, was the one that that stood out to me as a benchmark. Watson, who's still alive today, an incredible photographer, portrait photographer. But there's a lot of really, really good photographers today. We're in another age of incredible because of the tools we have. And so, but I would say those are probably the ones that inspired me the most growing up and studying photography.
Irving Penn and Ansel Adams.
Irving Penn, yeah, and Albert Watson, people like that.
I used to work for an art company, and one of the most amazing things is I hung up a couple of Ansel Adams original artwork
Wow,
at an office for it was the AT&T headquarters.
wow,
So I actually got a chance to, because they own a lot of his work.
that's nice.
So putting up some of his work in the office was one of
Yeah.
my biggest achievements on my bucket list was to, see some of the original work, but to actually put my hands on it and hang it up was amazing.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
So next question is, if you had to trade your lighting for another, which would it be?
You mean my current stuff?
Yes.
Well, here's what I would say. You have to get to the point where the brand name is not the most important thing. You say, oh, pro photos, well, it's expensive. It's very good gear. Well, it's true. It is good gear, expensive, but who can afford it, right? Not when you're starting out. So um, I don't look at the name brand so much. I used Paul C. Busta for years. The white. Well, it was the what were they called? Well, they were the Zaps. No, they were called the Einsteins. I used the Einsteins for years. Some of the best pictures you see in my portfolio are shot with Einsteins, but they don't do high speed sync, which I don't use a ton, but they had some limitations. And now with the Westcott with the batteries built in and high speed sync and, all these things, the newer strobes are pretty amazing. So, but again, it's not the name brand. I say that I wouldn't just throw out a name brand, partly because I'm I wouldn't say I'm obligated to say Westcott are the best strobes out there, but I believe that they're the best company out there, and they do have really good strobes. But I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't matter to me what name brand is on the outside. Does it work? Does it get me to my end result?
Nice. So I just have one more question, and that'll be good. Let me see. You kind of answered a lot of the questions already in the video, so I don't want to run over the same questions again. Okay, so here's one. Let's see. So your work often blends the lines between fine art and commercial photography. How do you strike a balance between creative expression and meeting client expectations?
All right. In the beginning, I didn't have much of a choice. I had to make a living, and so I photographed what I thought the clients wanted. Not a bad thing. I looked at clients. I go, oh, I could do that. Built a few pictures and put it in my portfolio. And then they hired me. There came a time when I had to say, look, I'm tired of doing that. I'm going to create images that I like. I'm going to put in my portfolio, and I'm going to pray that the right client comes along and hires me. And that's what I started doing. And eventually I just did what I love. And the right art director, the right creative director came along and said, we want this guy, get Joel Grimes. And so you have to make a switch at some point. Can you start out like that? I don't know if you can, unless you have a rich parent that's paying your way or something. So you have to say at some point, I am going to concentrate on my personal work, incorporate it into my portfolio, and art directors, the art buyers will find me. They will. Because I'm going to give you an example. If there's 10 photographers in my little area, let's say when I was in Denver, 10 photographers my age, they're go-getters, they're out there pounding the streets. And what are they doing when they get up in the morning? They go, what do my clients needs? What are my clients' needs? How can I fulfill that? So now what happens is you have 10 photographers showing portfolio images that look just like everyone else. So your odds aren't very good that you can get hired. But when you just do what you want and it's good, clean images that, but have your brand, an art director goes, oh, this is different. Wow, look at this person. Let's get this person in here. I got a perfect campaign for him. So you can charge a lot more money when you go and do your own look and put it in the marketplace than you can by trying to copy or fit the needs of all your clients, because you're one of a kind, and that makes you a lot more money.
So overall, just being yourself
Be
and
yourself. Be
for
yourself. You got to eat. You got to eat. You got to have a roof over your head. But at some point, you got to fight for your brand, and it works. It works because every art director, not every, but most art directors are going, it's the same old stuff that keeps coming in the door. We want something fresh. And then you walk in there, oh my gosh, look at this stuff. And they'll hire you. So, at any rate, it worked for me.
I'll take that into account whenever when I'm trying to look for more gigs out there. I mean, I do now try to separate myself from other photographers. I don't see myself following a lot of trends because I know I will get lost in it and
Yeah.
forget forget what I was originally out to do and do something completely else. Um, but other than that, I think that I've learned a lot today from you, and I
Oh,
think what
good.
you offered was very insightful. Hopefully, everyone else finds it insightful and understanding. Hopefully, people can understand that it's not easy just being a photographer and just going out there. You have to work hard for it, and you know, again, like you said, unless you have parents to blow thousands of dollars on equipment and just getting out there, even then you still have to work for it. Nothing's given to you.
I never met a person that, out of all the photographers I rubbed elbows with, the ones that came from the rich families, they never made it.
Yeah.
You got to you got to start out poor because you have to work towards something and you have to be tenacious. And you can't, if it's all been given to you, you don't value it, and you never end up working hard. And so that's the best thing I ever had. Was I paid for my own college. I worked my way through things. I had two jobs, at certain points to make ends meet. And because of that tenacity, it just carried with me as I went into being a photographer. So anyways, I think it's important. Yeah. Don't look for the silver spoon.
Yes,
So the handout.
most definitely. So this will be uploaded sometime next week. I have as well put your new um beginning photography in there because I think it's something interesting for a lot of people to see and go out and purchase if it's still up there. But other than that, we're gonna go ahead and end it right here. And I just want to thank you again for meeting with me and
Yeah.
taking your time out to do this.
Very good. I enjoyed it. I hope that, like I said, if I could pass on one thing to one person, I guess it's worth it. So um, it's been a pleasure. So, and nice to meet you too. So,
All right, thank you. Have a great day.
all right, Noah, thank you.